There we go. Corinne, how are you?
I'm well. How are you, Leon?
Yeah, I'm really good. Yeah, I'm really
So
been
excited to be here with you today.
likewise. Yeah, I've been really looking forward to today. There's loads of parallels in our journey and loads of things that you said which has just struck chord after chord. So I hope you're good for maybe a 8 or 9 hour podcast.
Let's do it. Let's dive in.
But that said, all this Course in Miracles stuff, that's probably going to go out of the window once I found out about the pet chickens.
I love talking about my pet chickens. Oh my goodness. And I've learned so many spiritual lessons from them. Yeah, I'm a chicken mom. I like that better than chicken lady. And we've had chickens for about, oh gosh, I think going on 8, 9 years or so. So yeah, they're really fun.
It
They're really
prompted me in 18 episodes. I haven't had a prop before, but I was prompted to go, what the
fun.
yes.
I You just mentioned props. I have a stuffed animal chicken, but it's in the other room. I would have given you that if, if it was handy.
Yeah, when I read those, I was like, what the fork? This is amazing. Chickens, left, right, and center.
Yep, yep.
Let's forget
Love the
about the
birds.
Course in Miracles. We're going to talk about chickens. So, I've got loads of things that are on my list that I'd like to talk to you about. I think a lot of the shared experiences are to do with the duration of the journey of anxiety that I share with yourself and the early start to it and how that I often use the phrase like default setting, with a frequency of being and a frequency of thought and expectancy and all of these kind of relevant sort of descriptive terms for sort of the anticipation of what's to come, which takes you away from the moment. And then when that does become your default setting in those very impressionable sort of phases in life where we even know from like the point of view of say neuroplasticity, these are the eras in our life where things get really set in stone as such, and it therefore takes a lot of work to undo just the way you hold yourself. So,
Hmm.
and as I said to you prior to us pressing record, was like one of your phrases, which really was so useful and helpful, truly helpful,
Hmm.
was the ego hides trauma in the body.
Hmm.
So if you would please start with that, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, sure. So first, I just want to acknowledge that that sentence was said by my dear friend Freedom Cartwright, and she is the one who said that exact sentence. And it struck me because the first time I heard her say that the ego hides trauma in the body, I thought, well, the ego hides trauma in the mind. But then I stopped for a moment and I was like, wait a second, the body is in the mind. So of course, it's going to be a fantastic hiding place for the ego to hide its stuff. We believe that we're bodies, but again, it comes back to this idea that the body is in the mind. So with the ego hiding trauma in the body, this has been a big, just like it struck you, that
Mhm.
teaching struck me and really has um, sort of brought me into a different direction where obviously we know that all healing is at the mind level. I'm not denying that at all. All healing is at the mind level. But what it has brought me into is recognizing that if I'm disconnected from my body, if I'm practicing A Course in Miracles all from my intellect, if I'm telling myself I'm not a body, okay, I believe I'm not a body, but if I'm painfully honest, I wake up every day believing I am a body. I feel the aches and pains. I take my vitamins, like I do things for the body. So for me to intellectually tell myself that, I'm not a body while I actually do still believe it, there's a mismatch there.
Okay.
So I've sort of come back to like, I do believe I'm a body. I'm willing to look to my body for, if there's a sign, if there's a signal that's popping up, um, what what is it? What can I learn? And that learning is always going to point me back to the mind. So this is where, again, it always comes back to the mind level. But I have found that in tuning in to my body and sensing, let me back up for one moment. This is where my most recent branch of my journey has brought me into studying the body's energetic system, because that has been very eye-opening in terms of uncovering belief systems that are stored in the body. So for instance, at the base of the body, which is the root chakra, which is a power center in the body that is linked to our sense of safety, I can sort of tune in and recognize immediately that my lower body is not a place where I am having presence. You know, I'm not connected to that part of my body.
Sure.
And so that's observation number one. And then as I sort of tune in, like, well, do I feel safe? Like, no, here's the anxiety piece again. You know, no, I can think of ways in which I get caught in anticipation or don't feel safe working or walking around in the world. So it's like I can look to these different power centers in the body to link up to belief systems that I'm still carrying that need to be brought to the Holy Spirit for healing. So it's still always about coming back to the mind, but it's like the body can sometimes be a little bit of a map if we are feeling like, well, you know, I don't know where to look next. Like, I know I'm not healing the sick and raising the dead. So, you know, I must still have some unconscious guilt or some unconscious beliefs that I'm holding. Well, what do I need to see? And this has been a really helpful framework for me in my most recent, you know, learnings with the Course in Miracles.
Fantastic. Yeah, I noticed that was something in, obviously, I've deep dived into a lot of the stuff that you've got available, which is really lovely. And there's loads of lovely stuff on your website and on YouTube. You've got your podcasts, and your openness to allow yourself to take use and benefit from numerous sort of systems. You know, you won't sort of say to yourself, oh, I can't go there because I'm studying a Course in Miracles. It's like, well, I'm studying a Course in Miracles, but if that's going to help me and I can tie it in your own symbolic understanding, as you've just explained, then these things can just be part of the toolkit, can't they?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I used to be, well, I'm studying A Course in Miracles, so I'm not doing anything else. I used to very much feel that. And there's nothing wrong with that, because at that point in time, I needed to be super hardcore with the course. My mind was an absolute mess. I was an anxious mess. I was really struggling. I needed to be super regimented with A Course in Miracles. And then something happened in 2021. A whole lot of tumultuous situations were erupting in my life, and I was really struggling. And I had an experience in my backyard, and you may have heard this in one of my podcasts, because episode 30 on, I'm slowly unpacking the things that have happened over the past few years, because it's so much that it was very hard for me to talk about for a long time, and I'm still getting used to talking about it. But I had an experience in my backyard where I felt the presence of Jesus, and I felt him. It was as if he bowed his head and extended his arm, and he said, I'll let you two take it from here. And at that point, I had what felt like a full body experience of this beautiful, loving, feminine, grounded, fierce energy. And it brought me down into my body and into like the earth. And one of the insights that arose out of that experience is that my body is of the earth, my mind is of God. So my body is just like a tree or another animal. It's terrestrial, you know, it's terrestrial, it's of the earth. And it's my mind that's of God. And that's actually opened up a connection to working more deeply, you know, with my body in the ways that we have already talked about. So what came out of that time, I had a number of very supportive friends who were helping me along the way. And my friend Uma Sangvi had said to me, she said, Corinne, you know, A Course in Miracles is an arrow. And I thought, wow, yes, like the Course is an arrow. It's at the end, I think it's the workbook where it says like no more lessons are needed. Now it's like you and your inner teacher.
Yeah.
I have had enough trust to recognize that the Holy Spirit is going to bring me where the Holy Spirit needs to bring me for my own individualized curriculum. If I'm going to say it has to be the Course always, all the time, in every moment, I'm limiting the Holy Spirit. I'm limiting where the Holy Spirit can bring me in terms of healing, in terms of what I need to see. So I've become extremely open-minded. And, you know, part of the experience that led up to what happened in my backyard that day was this feeling of guidance coming over me that was asking me to let go of the Course. And this is when I had been like, you know, hardcore, like I'm a Course in Miracles student and only Course in Miracles. And letting go of the Course, like what? Like that was my spiritual foundation. That has been my spiritual foundation for my entire adult life. I started studying the book when I was 19. I'm 46 now. And to let it go was like, what? But I learned enough trust at that time to say, okay, Jesus, like, okay, Holy Spirit, like, you know what you're doing, you know, I don't, and I will trust you. And then that's when I had, you know, those experiences happen. And I've since been brought back to the Course in an even deeper way. So it's like I know we can all relate to this, where you study the Course, you underline something because it's like, wow, it hits you. And then years later, you go back and you see that you underlined it. So you know you've read it before, but it gets you on a whole deeper level this time. It just, you know, it comes down and it's like now you know it in every cell of your body. It's not just an intellectual thing. It's like you know it from your head to your toe and beyond. So that's been, you know, that's been my journey. And so I still consider myself a student of the Course. And as I said, I've still been brought back to it. And the Holy Spirit is also introducing a lot of other modalities and healing tools for me that I have needed to address my individualized curriculum, because we know that curriculum is different for each one of us. It's all highly individualized.
Beautiful. That ties in with something that I wrote down today in preparation for our conversation. Your trauma separation dilemma can be used by the Christ mind.
I love that.
And yeah, I mean, the highly individualized curriculum, as it's put to us in the course, the way that tied in with this statement that I heard was kind of like, you know, exactly what you're describing. It's like our individual, the makeup of what it is that we're struggling with, or what it is that we're putting together as our toolkit. It's for us. It's, you know, it's not like we're going to become Jehovah's Witnesses and go and knock on people's doors and say, I've discovered this exact recipe. It's for you too, and it's for you, and it's for you. It's like
right.
once,
Right. And, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
that's fine.
There's a quote that speaks to our highly individualized curriculum. And it says something to the effect of, we will be, I'm literally trying to find it as I'm talking and I can't find it, so I'm going to let that go. But it talks about how, you know, as many previous errors as possible will be corrected. You know, we'll have a chance to correct as many previous errors as possible. And those previous errors, we all make different errors. So, you know, no one's curriculum is going to look like another person's curriculum. And it's a mistake to judge, you know, what another person's curriculum might be because it doesn't look like yours. So we are being brought back. And that's what I feel with my most recent journey. It's that I've been brought into situations and teachings and learnings that are giving me an opportunity to correct very specific errors. For instance, I can give you an example. I have found that I absorb a lot of energy, for lack of a better word. I can easily absorb other people's stuff and take it on as my own. And I was a therapist for a decade. I have my master's and my EDS degrees in counseling. I'm a licensed counselor. And I burnt out very quickly. And I never really understood why. And it is because, my clients would say, "Oh, I feel so good when I'm with you." Like, it was because I was sucking it in. Like, I was taking on their stuff in ways that I didn't know how to not do. Right. And no matter how many times I read this section in A Course in Miracles on the true use of empathy, I have read that section over and over and over. I still couldn't stop myself from absorbing I shouldn't say other people's stuff across the board. It's very specific situations. And so what I've needed to learn is how to stop doing that. And that's where I've been brought into more of this energetic chakra work, because a lot of where we take in things that aren't ours is through our solar plexus. And I always had a lot of stomach issues. I always would get upset stomachs in the morning. I'd be so nervous, always have a nervous stomach, before certain things. It makes sense. There again is the body doing something, and it's pointing us back to a healing that's needed in the mind. And I will just share, you and I were talking about this before we started recording. There is a course quote, and this is quick backstory. My mom is also a course student. She has been my primary teacher. She is the one that introduced A Course in Miracles to me. And she
patiently waited for you to catch her up.
Exactly. I wanted nothing to do with it, and nothing to do with the course in the beginning. I was rude to her, I will admit it, when she was trying to, share this amazing thing with me as a teenager. But we were positive that there was a quote that spoke to symptoms and tracing those symptoms back to a unforgiveness or a healing that would need to happen in the mind. But we could not find that quote. We could not find it for years. No matter how many times we tried to search, we just weren't coming up with the right keywords. And then a friend of mine was like, "Oh, I know exactly where that quote is." And finally, here it is. So I'll read this.
Yes, please.
It says, "Sickness takes many forms, and so does unforgiveness. The forms of one but reproduce the forms of the other, for they are the same illusion. So closely is one translated into the other that a careful study of the form a sickness takes will point quite clearly to the form of unforgiveness that it represents." So that's the sentence right there. And then it goes on to say that just seeing this won't affect a cure. This is achieved only by one recognition that only forgiveness heals an unforgiveness, and only unforgiveness can possibly give rise to sickness of any kind. So a few things that I can just highlight about that is that, if a careful study of the form of sickness is pointing us back to an unforgiveness, that's great to know. And there's an ego temptation in there to get lost in analysis. We can get lost in trying to analyze our sickness or feel guilty. Like, if we're struggling with a sickness, well, where am I unforgiving? It's really important that we not get caught up in that, but instead recognize that if, there's a physical symptom that's showing up, we can just ask the Holy Spirit quite calmly and gently, "Please show me what it is that I need to see. I'm willing." And when the time is right, when our willingness is such, when circumstances are whatever they need to be, we can sometimes make that connection. And my example of absorbing others' stuff and having stomach aches is a perfect example of that, I think. So I'm very excited about that quote. It just points to me that the body can be repurposed. So rather than just saying like, "Oh, I'm not a body, I'm just not going to worry about it," we can repurpose the body as a tool to point us back to where the mind needs healing.
Amazing. Yeah, it becomes part of the mirror of perception, doesn't it? It's like, what am I seeing in the mirror that I can't see? So, I mean, in terms of like just a myopic kind of perception, the point of perception, as we look out through our eyes, we don't see ourselves, we see what our eyes are resting upon. Therefore, with the use of a mirror or the presence of a mirror, then we can see ourselves as we look out through our eyes. And the body is part of that mirror. The body, if you learn to interpret the symbolism as you're beautifully describing, to say, what's the hidden message? Because it's all pure abstraction. You know, we know from like Ken's favorite quotes about the world's an outward picture of an inner condition. That's basically talking about mirroring, isn't it? And it's like it we need as many tools, as many opportunities to be able to zoom in with that microscope and then
Yes.
zoom back out again, because you know we don't want to stay at that subatomic level. Yes, if we can get right down to like what is this trauma, where's it manifesting, what's the origin, ultimately that's all part of the story that needs to be discarded. And
Mhm.
as we were talking earlier about our shared experience of anxiety, it fits so perfectly with the ego, because we know that the ego never wants to be in the moment. It doesn't want you to know you've got a mind in case you choose against it. So therefore it's going to project your attention forwards and backwards. And what's forwards and backwards? Forwards is the anticipation of um, a recurrence of something which was terrifying. And then looking backwards is to retain the memory of the terror so that you can keep it in the moment, so that you can fear the future, guilt. And it's, you know, it all fits in exactly with that thinking of just like taking you away from the now, which is where the
Yeah.
peace is.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And what where my mind went as you were speaking was that with retaining, memories of past traumatic things and anticipating things into the future,
Mm.
we talked about neuroplasticity and the brain a bit before we started
Mm.
recording, with the idea that the ego hides trauma in the body,
Mhm.
and that the ego is going to project and keep us in anticipation of the future, or fears, memories of the past. I've been finding it incredibly, like, healing on speed with going with the Holy Spirit into somatic based trauma treatments. So for instance, and everybody listening, I'm very open. My whole book, From Anxiety to Love, I share a lot of my experiences with anxiety. I teach from my experience, and going and doing I do EMDR. It's called eye movement desensitization and
Oh,
reprocessing.
yeah,
It's
I've
where
heard.
you recollect whatever the issue is, and by moving your eyes back and forth, you typically follow. There's a few ways of doing it, but I follow my therapist's hands back and forth. Her hand from left to right. You need your eyes to cross over the center. What that's actually doing is getting your brain, your two hemispheres of your brain, to digest that memory, so it's not stuck. So you're not like stuck in a loop of
Mm.
that memory taking hold. It's another form of forgiveness. Like, the memory loses its charge.
Yes.
And doing these types of practices with the Holy Spirit have been just so expansive for me and healing for me, because it's getting at the trauma that's been hidden in the body, and it's interrupting that cycle of past memories being stuck that are still repeating, playing out in some way in the present, which then enables me to drop into the Holy Spirit's arms, in this moment in a much, much deeper way. So I am a fan of traditional therapy and these somatic based types of therapies like EMDR. There's also somatic experiencing technique, which I haven't done, but I've heard good things about. So doing these in conjunction with the Holy Spirit is just incredible. And it doesn't mean that we aren't course students. We can still do our coursework. We still have to do our forgiveness work, because otherwise, the healing will not stick. It'll fall short. So again, individualized curriculum. It's all, if we're open, the Holy Spirit will lead us to that which can be most helpful.
And don't worry, the ACIM police won't come round and take your copy of the book away. We'll find out. 'Cause
I love that. I love
I've
that.
yeah, I've done NLP, I've done holistic therapy, a lot of stuff through the influence of my wife, who suffered with chronic fatigue syndrome for many years, and therefore had to look anywhere to anybody. And that thinking is something that she's been able to influence me with, and it's rubbed off on me. Whereas I used to have this quite stoic kind of sense of like, well, nobody knows my details better than me. Who could possibly heal me better than me? I was there and I went through it. And, you know, funnily enough, never guess what, but I didn't have all the answers. And, you know, that was all
We
part.
don't know what we don't know.
And also, you know, that just plays into this whole thing of like just letting go of the story. And it reminds me of like a couple of things I spoke to Mark Anthony Lord about on their podcast. A lovely, lovely man, as you know.
I love Mark.
You know, and he was talking about, it was a beautiful little session in his podcast, a section where he was just being so humble. He was going, who am I to say what the Holy Spirit will use to heal, you know? And he literally made the example of like a needle in somebody's arm, you know, if they're a drug user or what. It's like, we don't know. Who are you to judge that? You know, the Holy Spirit can turn anything. All things can be used, of course, because why would it not? It would just, anything that the ego looks upon to reinforce scarcity and lack and separation, the Holy Spirit is going to look beyond that illusion to the truth of like all things can lead us back to our remembrance of the oneness, really. And
Absolutely.
we were talking about the counterintuitive aspect of letting go of your story as well, you know, in terms of your ego and the counsel that it gives you, and the way that it reinforces the need for you to remember every detail. Part defense of like, you know, don't forget that on a Wednesday at 3 o'clock a book fell off the shelf and landed on your head, you know, and that hurt, didn't it? So don't ever forget that. You know, something as bizarre as that. Let's remember every Wednesday at 3 o'clock that a book could land, you know. And yet we know that when you let go of that expectation, that thought, that memory, then the peace can, the freshness of the piece can come through again, because it obscures it. This is the fundamental stuff from the introduction, isn't it, of like the interference to love's eternal presence. That's what these strange little specifics are. And I think as well, listening to what you were saying a minute ago, it makes me think of that bypassing of specifics, you know, to find a way to say to the Holy Spirit, like something like, you know, instead of saying, oh, can you heal this for me, or can you help me to see this, it's like, what's the generalized thing here, which will be a belief in lack or a belief in separation. So, you know, Robin Duncan, somebody that I really, really love, she was saying, you know, about almost like making a prayer in terms of saying, God, please help me to heal, or please heal the part of my mind where the thought of separation and lack is residing in my
Mm,
current mindset, if you like.
mm. I love that. I love that. Yeah. I love that. Please heal the part of my mind where the separation or the lack exists. That's beautiful. And just to
Yeah.
your point, you said so many good things. We're not going to get there when we're bypassing. So for instance, if there's this really great diagram that so the Love Lens is a program that I'm a part of with Freedom Cartwright, who I mentioned before, and Pastor
Mm.
Yolanda Batts. The three of us are finishing some episodes up. I don't know when they'll be released, but we had shared in an earlier episode this diagram of spiritual bypassing as it pertains to course teachings. And there's a figure doing a leap of, you know, we're not bodies, racism, because the program's on racism. So racism isn't real, the world isn't real, those types of teachings, hoping that we're going to land on the freedom that forgiveness brings. And then there's also a line at the bottom. So it's not the leap, but it's the line at the bottom of all the course teachings that are actually prompting us to look. They're prompting us to look with the Holy Spirit. And just what you said about, not bypassing and looking to the beliefs. And we have to look at everything. We have to be willing to look at everything, no matter how difficult and uncomfortable it may be, because it is that, the course says, like, leave no, I can't remember the exact words, but it's about not leaving any cornerstones of unforgiveness.
Yeah.
Overturn, upturn all those stones, like expose everything, look at everything. And it can seem like that would be a very scary thing to do, but when we're doing it with the Holy Spirit and we know that the goal is healing, that it becomes worth it and very motivating, to look. So it's important that we are doing that internal work, that internal reflection. And just to your point that you said earlier, also, the Holy Spirit will use everything, no matter what it is, our specific circumstances, no matter what it is that's showing up in our life. I make it a habit of releasing everything to the Holy Spirit. So not just the things that are painful, but all the good stuff too.
Brilliant.
I'm offering my chickens to you, Holy Spirit. my relationship with my husband, my life, everything that I cherish, I'm offering that to you, Holy Spirit, because I don't want to misuse it. I'm offering it to you to keep it safe, to use it to help me awaken. And the Holy Spirit will use all of those things. We're repurposing them when we do that. So rather than those things being used on behalf of the ego, we're saying to the Holy Spirit, you use this to show me who it is that I and all of us truly are. Use this to help me awaken. And so we can repurpose absolutely everything in our lives. And that's as simple as offering it to the Holy Spirit, saying, here you go.
Yeah, brilliant. Well said. And what comes to mind as well as further, not just testament to that, but actually foundational, the foundations upon which the whole course rests, really, when you think about Holy Spirit and Helen and the use of psychology, because when you're talking about that phrase, and I know the phrase you mean, of like, leave no stone unturned as you look, with the Holy Spirit through what's going on, and that that makes me think of just very textbook psychology of I'll often say to people, we've got a flashlight, you're in your mind, and you need to shine it in every little corner where if you leave a space, that's where you've left the potential for the density of the darkness to trick you into thinking there's something obscured there. Whereas if you shine the light in all of these spots, you'll find that there is nothing there. And then because Holy Spirit and Helen, in their relationship, Helen was psychology all day long, wasn't she? So it's kind of like, why wouldn't the Holy Spirit use psychology as part of the symbolic language to communicate to Helen's right mind so that she could remove the blocks and let the pen flow and let this incredible system come through that other people can then find their specifics in the generalized language or something.
Yeah, exactly. That was a beautiful example of repurposing psychology. So
Yeah.
taking these psychological terms and just the psychological ideas and bringing new meaning to them, totally repurposing it and allowing, she allowed this incredible pathway to flow through her. Thank goodness. Thank goodness for all of us. Yeah.
I'm going to just look at my questions. So
Yeah.
I tell you
Okay, you
what,
had a bunch.
oh goodness me, yeah. I'll tell you what I did like was you were talking at one point about not fixing Corinne and making Corinne better, that learning you're not Corinne, and it's not that remembrance rather, it's in that remembrance that you discover that you can find the self-esteem to hold everything together.
Mm.
That ring a bell?
Yes, it does. I have no idea where I said that or when, but it does ring a bell.
Good.
And we are very tempted to fix our egos. Like, let's make, using myself as an example, let me, try to fix Corinne so she doesn't have anxiety anymore, so she doesn't fall into fear traps. So, whatever the things are, the ways that we want to improve. And I mean, there's a whole industry surrounding self-improvement and wellness. And again, it's a repurposed thing. If you're doing that to enhance your sense of separation and sense of glorified ego self, it's just going to lead to more ego, experiences. But if you've repurposed that, and the Holy Spirit is guiding you, to certain teachings that are in the wellness self-improvement area, go for it. Like, so be it. But it's not about fixing our egos. It's about learning that that's not who we are. So whatever it is that we're brought into to try to quote unquote fix the ego, ultimately the goal is to learn that the ego is not who we are. So it's I had this, you're reminding me that I think I may have written about this in my book, but it was like a recognition that Corinne may always have anxiety, but I'm learning that I'm not Corinne. And there is where I can walk around feeling in touch with myself, my soul, the truth, the Holy Spirit, as I'm learning that that's not me. So that's, it's important to remember that we're not trying to fix our egos, that it's ultimately about remembering who it is that we truly are.
That's
Where the peace
cool.
comes.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that, because that's then putting us into the I am awareness, which is looking out and observing the egoic patterns of what's playing out with the human mind, because you've still got a human mind, even though you've realized you're not Corinne. Your true identity, your awareness isn't contained fully or at all within that construct. But
Yep.
it's like having a pair of tinted glasses on, isn't it? And you've got a pair of tinted glasses on, but you've still got a pair of tinted glasses on.
Right. Love it. Oh yeah, that's great. Thank you for that.
So I tell you what else was really interesting as well was do you feel particularly drawn to the Jean Dixon?
Yes, I love that quote, the Jean
Yeah, tell
Dixon
us about
quote.
that quote, because it's bizarre how
So
parallel.
yeah, so this is not in the FIP edition. You'd have to look in the text
Yeah.
or the CE edition. I think it's in there. And Jean Dixon was a famous astrologer, and in Helen's notes, in the dictation that was coming through,
Yeah.
Jesus said something to the effect of, Jean Dixon was right. I'm going to
Oh,
botch this, but he says Jean Dixon was right in her emphasis of feet on the ground and fingertips in the heaven. Many knew exactly what she meant, and it was the right miracle for them. It's something to that effect. And that really fit in with the experiences that I talked about earlier, with this recognition that our bodies are of the earth and our minds are of God. This idea of having my feet on the ground but reaching, my fingertips to heaven. Again, it's like a body mind thing. So the more present I am in my body, the now is all there is. Heaven is in the now. So it's like the more present that I can get in the here and now with my feet on the ground and be grounded, it's like the more I can start to really tune in to the truth of who it is that we are. And I have so what I'm currently teaching, I don't have any of this content on my podcast yet, but I have a program called the From Anxiety to Love Sanctuary, and we're doing a lot of this work in that class. And also actually in my From Anxiety to Love Masterclass, I have some bonus trainings about this. So if you think of a tree, and I have a diagram of a tree, and if you picture the roots of the tree, and if it's broad, deep roots that the tree sends down into the ground, the canopy of the tree is able to open wider. There are more branches, wider branches, thicker, bigger branches. But if the roots are shallow, that tree is not going to be able to have a wide canopy because it doesn't have roots that can sustain it. Wow. So the parallel for me has been that the more I'm able to clear out trauma and energy and belief systems that I'm holding in my body, so the more I'm able to have presence in my entire body, it's like the upper channels can open up. So if we're thinking of chakras, as my lower chakras open and like ground in to the ground beneath me, as my feet are on the ground, my fingertips to heaven means that those upper chakras of like clairvoyance, clairaudience, those things can open. And what's been interesting about my recent journey is that I've had some experiences that have really taken me like, what was that? Like, what just happened? And I'll be given an answer down the road. So for instance, nice. This is a story I hope to share in my podcast at some point. So I'm excited to be sharing it with you now. While a lot of the turmoil was happening, I think it was in 2021, I woke up at like 3. Things always seem to happen at 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what it is about 3 o'clock in the morning, but I woke up to use the restroom, and with my eyes closed, I saw the image of the base of angel wings. It was this lacy, feathery, beautiful, intricate, almost like you were looking at like a piece of lace or like a paper doily, like those beautiful patterns. And in the center of the angel wings was a pelvis and like bones, like a hip bones. And there was this cascading green light just shimmering down the wings and across the pelvis. And I, opened my eyes and I literally was like, that was interesting. Like, what was that? I don't know, but it happened. And I was having a lot of experiences like that of seeing pictures and seeing numbers always in green and always, very beautiful. And I didn't know what to make of that or what was happening. And what I later learned from my current teacher, her name's Wendy DeRosa, and she wasn't specifically addressing my experience, but she was just talking about the chakras in general. And I connected the dots. Yeah. The experience that I had of my feet being on the ground, connecting with the earth and that recognition that my body is of the earth, my mind is of God, and having that experience of our divine mother in my backyard. What I think happened is that I had an experience of my root chakra opening, possibly for the first time. Again, root chakra constricts with trauma, with lack of safety. I feel like I had a true opening of a sense of safety and a connection that was somehow coming in through my body, through having my feet on the ground. And it caused my upper chakras to open, and hence the visions that started happening, because this is all happening around the same time. So that quote, "Feet on the ground, fingertips in heaven," is almost like how I'm approaching A Course in Miracles now. It's like I can't study it from the intellect anymore. I can hear the ideas and think about the ideas, but I need to learn these things through experience. I need to know it not just in my mind, but literally through like every cell of my body, like a deep, deep, deep knowing that far exceeds, just what my brain thinks it knows. And again, I'm saying that it's really symbolic when I say that it's every cell in my body knowing it. It's like something greater than just my brain. That's what I'm trying to convey when I'm saying that. So that quote, "Feet on the ground, fingertips in heaven," is for me my declaration that I'm willing to look at whatever it is that I need to look at. I'm willing to do whatever trauma related work or healing related work that the Holy Spirit wants me to do in order to clear out old errors and old belief systems, and am willing to forgive in like across the map. There's nothing that I'm not willing to forgive. How that forgiveness ends up looking on a physical form level is going to be up to the Holy Spirit. But I am just so invigorated, if you can't tell, by that quote and all the implications of that quote, because it has matched my lived experience over the past few years. I just feel like it's a gem and it's just been extremely supportive to me. And I know that the people that I'm working with have really resonated with that quote as well.
Wow. I think
Yeah.
there's obviously some quite deep symbolic communication going on with yourself there as well, isn't there? You know, the green light, the chakras, the holding the energy in a lower point so that the energy can't rise up to other aspects of your being and your thinking, and the lace. All of those elements are very purposeful in what you're saying to yourself. And, you know, I love that. I'm quite fascinated with that kind of transitional position between conscious and subconscious thinking, brain waves. And my last piece of music that I'm working on at the moment came to me at 3:30 in the morning. I was awake in bed, and full set of lyrics and a melody, which has never happened to me before to this degree. And part of my mind, which was very comfy and warm, was going, "You'll remember all this in the morning." And the other part of me was like, "Dude, you need to get up now and go and
Uh-huh.
get your phone and just stand there and record yourself humming this tune and document all these lyrics." And then also some interesting guided meditations, which I'm going to start to put together again. They came at like 3 in the morning, where you're at this kind of point where literally your lower mind is out of the equation, really, and you're just in the realm of subconscious symbols. You're talking to yourself, aren't you, in a language that words are secondary in a sense, and the symbols themselves are clearer because words are out of the way because you are asleep. Whereas when you wake up, you know, you're still having that same experience, you're still having that same kind of soliloquy, but we have a different position where we think things are more verbal, and we feel like the verbal aspect of our inner communication is primary, and that's summoning up symbolic imagery, but it's the same thing in the same split second. And also, what I really appreciate about you bringing that quote up from Gene Dixon is part of my healing has obviously been my music and using it as a form of catharsis to gain objectivity on a process. And I wrote a record which was like a concept album which documented somebody's journey through the loss of their hero. So the way I constructed it was I created a focal point, an external focal point for this character, and when that external focal point was removed from the equation, then the person's awareness had no point to rest outside themselves. So as a consequence of that, kind of what happens to them surreptitiously is it starts to turn itself inward. So a person's lived, let's say, 10, 20, 30, say 30 odd years, and their attention started to get positioned outside themselves. Then when the key figure in their life is gone, then their attention's got nowhere to rest, so it turns inwards, and they have like a memory
Mm.
of like being below the clouds and almost looking up, like this kind of, I guess in our course vernacular it'd be there must be another way.
Mm.
And there's a memory of like being a child and having a very natural connection with the sky, and this sense of feeling like you could fly, running around with your arms outstretched as though you're actually flying. Because I wanted to use that because symbolically this is like the pinnacle of human imagination, is that we can
Mm.
fly.
Mm.
And I'll often say to people, you know, when we have those flying dreams, or as children, when we believed that, we didn't think to ourselves, there was no limit. It's like, well, I'm going to have a flying dream, but I tell you what, I'll stick to like 10 or 15 feet off the ground just in case something happens. It's like, I'm going to have a flying dream and I'm going to the moon or whatever, because there's no limitation. So this person, once their external focal point's gone, which was initially like extremely traumatic and changes everything, that's replaced by a memory of themselves. And through this journey, there's like a communication with these two aspects, the man and the boy. So the first part of the story is called The Man Remembers the Boy. And then the second part is called The Boy Rescues the Man, which is
Mm.
kind of like the Wordsworth thing of like, the child is the father of the man because it's closer to source energy and hasn't been so distorted by the world. So there's like a dual aspect to this conversation with the man talking to himself as a boy, but then he reaches the point where he realizes that they're just one and he's still the boy. He can still fly. He's maybe not going to run around in the garden with his arms out because the neighbors might phone the authorities and have him locked up for being a bit mad. But in his dreams, he can still go to this place. So at the very end of this story, which the story is called Back Above the Clouds, and again, what I did was like I created 14 songs, and they're supposedly diary entries, but the way that I left like an ambiguity to it was like diary entry number one is just called Wednesday the 13th, and then the second one might be called Sunday the 9th. Monday the 11th. So there's no way of pinpointing whether there was decades or years or weeks or months between these two moments. And then there's 14 diary entries that someone's taken from this person's journals, which has showed you this was me then, this was all of these stages. And then right at the very, very end, when the track's called Equilibrium, and I had a beautiful artist do me this image of like based on yin yang. And I said to him, I can see like a man with his arms around his knees in like a fetal position with his head here and his feet. And then the boy locked in, as though in the same construct as the yin yang. And the lyrics that I came up with were keep my feet on the ground and let my mind rise above the clouds.
Ah, there you go. I love it. I
So
love it.
yeah,
That's awesome. That's awesome. It makes me think just again as we like move forward in this healing pathway, we get clearer. I mean, maybe you've already known what your gifts are, but with music, with the storytelling, with meditations that you're talking about, it sounds like these are your gifts to bring forward, into the world. And I love that lyric that you just shared. That's awesome.
yeah, well, it's got even more pertinence now after all this
Mhm,
time because of you bringing my awareness to the Gene Dixon.
mhm, mhm. Awesome. Love it. I love it. That's great.
So I think again, there's so much, from with your book, From Anxiety to Love. Some of the notes I've got here is obviously healing the mind, deconstructing prior beliefs when guided to look again, and the ego hides trauma in the body. Um, and then as well, I'm thinking about teaching the body what relaxation does feel like, with like the tightly sprung coil, this kind of sort of physical setting, that the body thinks is normal to be just held in that point of physical anxiety. And like we were discussing about the lag, if you like, between the mind being further down the road to peace and the understanding that expands peace, and then the body still being at a separate point where it's held that frequency of a past condition.
Yeah, we were also touching upon this before we started the recording, and
Yeah.
what you just said about like teaching the body relaxation. Again, if our mind is like, I know the truth, not a body, I'm good, I get this, I'm peaceful. But then our body, like we're clenching our jaw throughout the night, we're you know, like you said, that tightly wound coil, and having to, teach the body relaxation. There's some work to do there.
Mm.
And this is where this idea of having our feet on the ground while our fingertips are in heaven, we might know the truth, we know these true teachings. Have we fully integrated them into our body? So it might be that we need to take a step back and do things to teach our body that relaxation, because anxiety, when we have anxiety, yes, we know, again, this is all happening at the level of the mind.
Mm.
And because we are identified with bodies, there's a response in the body that's very physical to anxiety. The body releases cortisol. There's all stress hormones. It's the fight or flight. And when that's happening on a chronic basis, it's a really tough state to be in. So doing things for the body to reteach it relaxation, I am all for that. And can be an incredibly helpful thing. And I'll just share with you one of the most recent discoveries. And again, this is another one of those things where I had an experience and then I didn't learn until years later what it meant.
Mm-hmm.
When I was going through that upheaval, lots of upheaval in 2021, I was finding that the only thing that was soothing to my body, my mind was a mess, my body was a mess. The only thing that I was finding soothing was lying flat on the ground, literally with my hands in the grass, my hands touching the earth. I'd be on a sheet because I have chickens and there's chicken poop everywhere. So, I have to be careful where I'm laying in my backyard. But that was the only thing that was helping my body. And, it was part of my connection with the Divine Mother, who I was also conceptualizing as like, so she has something to do with the earth. I don't know what. Well, I have a friend who just recently is like, Corinne, have you heard of grounding? It's also called earthing. Apparently, there's all this science showing that, number one, our bodies are conductive. Our bodies conduct electricity. Every single cell, every single substance in our body is conductive. Mm. And that there is a current that the earth is in, there's like, it's not an AC current, it's DC. I don't understand all of the electrical stuff, even though I was actually a physics major for one semester in college, but I found out very quickly that was not for me. Anyhow, when our bodies come into contact with the planet, the electrical charge of the body, I believe it's like a discharge, and you become grounded. There's actually something electrically that happens in the body when you are in contact with the planet. So that's been like, when I learned that, this is years after I was noticing that I was relaxing when I was lying on the ground. Years later, I learned about this thing called earthing and grounding. I would recommend, if anybody's interested in this, if you go to YouTube, there's a documentary called The Earthing Movie, and you'll learn all about the science in that documentary. And I was like, oh, that's what I was doing. Like that was the only thing that was helping me back then. So that can be one thing that people might explore if you're resonating with this idea of like the body being a tightly wound coil as a means of relaxing, because we are chronically ungrounded. We have shoes that are made of synthetic material that, we're in houses where, it's mainly being in shoes all the time that we don't have that electrical connection to the earth. But it's absolutely fascinating. So that's been an incredibly supportive tool for me in me helping my body to relax. And of course, there's other things too: exercise, listening to music, doing meditation, getting the cortisol out by, again, movement, yoga, things like that. But that we in my experience, I have to address the physical piece too, because anxiety can just take you so high. It can bring your energy so high up into your head, and that physical cortisol response that happens, we need to be able to flush that out. And it's much quicker when we utilize the body and do some type of movement, or connecting with the earth, whatever it might be, in order to bring the body back to a state of calmness and hopefully groundedness.
Yeah, brilliant advice. And I think as well, that's sort of bringing back to mind what we were saying about this isn't to delude the self into thinking anything that isn't in line with Holy Spirit, within realizing we're in the dream. But I can testify, you can testify to the fact that this is something that really is incredibly helpful and necessary, really, because there is some sort of demarcation between the two aspects of the self, between the mind and the body. And I just know that, if I'm having an experience that I recognize from the huge part of my life where anxiety just was running the show, for such a long time. And then to be like also then perpetuated almost under the radar as well. There was long periods of time where, like I'd said to you earlier, it's like if I thought I was relaxed, and it was like I wasn't relaxed, physically, because maybe you're not on high alert, or you're not, the doors aren't exploding and getting kicked in, but you're not at peace, and of course in miracles there's no such thing as degrees, you're either happy or you're not happy, so,
Yeah.
so I can definitely testify to the fact that this stuff, I might be thinking, oh wow, I feel totally mellow, totally happy, in my good place, but then my heart is like,
Mm-hmm.
and then what that would happen when I had a skin condition, it was like make like that part of my skin really hot, and then I'm scratching it, and then
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling like, wow, it's like a drug to be scratching, to let
Mm-hmm.
that out, and
Mm-hmm.
then you'd harm yourself. So, and a lot of my stuff was at night. So I'd wake up in the morning, I'd find that I'd scratch myself red raw somewhere with like the trauma that was hiding in my body,
Mm-hmm.
that I wasn't accessing, I wasn't getting to, because I hadn't worked out the language of it. I hadn't worked out how to get beyond the story and the memories that I was keeping hold of, in terms of like that phase where we don't realize that your safety lies in your defenselessness. And again, the paradox when Jesus sort of says salvation is paradox in the Course in Miracles, is because it is paradox. It is like completely counterintuitive to how the ego sets you up to remember this stuff, whereas remembering to forget, like, that beautiful thing of the Course in
Right.
Miracles, again, remembering to forget. And it's like, freeing yourself from that story. And
Yeah.
there's nothing happening in my immediate environment for me to not feel completely peaceful, but I wasn't feeling peaceful, and it was there. And for me, like, through my wife's influence, again, it'd be like going to see a naturopath and getting some medicine, some herbal supplements that are designed to take the fire out of your adrenal gland and things like that. This doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean that I've popped my Course in Miracles in the bin and I use it anymore, but these things.
Right. We have to be where we are. We have to be where we are. We're doing ourselves a disservice if we are pretending to be somewhere other than where we are. I would much rather let myself be where I am, take my vitamins because I still believe in them, let the Holy Spirit teach me experientially, by me being totally honest with the Holy Spirit, radically honest with the Holy Spirit about where I am, how I still believe I'm a body. I learn then through experience, versus there being a disconnect where I'm like mentally forcing. Mental gymnastics is a term that I heard recently, and I love that.
Yeah,
Where, I'm doing mental gymnastics to try to force myself into a place where I'm not experientially at. It's gonna fall flat. It's not gonna totally bring us all the way. So just what you said, I'm so glad that you emphasized that all that we're talking about, with the body and allowing ourselves to be where we are, does not negate any of the truth of the Course's teachings. It doesn't change that at all. It's a matter of recognizing that, like, if I'm trying to do mental gymnastics and get myself somewhere, and and my body is showing that it's this tightly wound coil still, we can again think of that course quote that I mentioned before about, symptoms, tracing that back to an unforgiveness that has to happen in the mind. To me, it's a moment of saying step back. Like, if I'm trying to think my way into the highest thought and my body's like, not there, let me step back and let me say, all right, Holy Spirit, I'm trying to do this without you. I'm trying to force my way into a thought of truth. I want to learn this experientially. I want to learn who I truly am. I want to learn peace. I want to learn forgiveness. You teach me, show me the way. And that's where we trust. That's where we trust that the Holy Spirit knows the way. We do not. Yes, we still can do our course lessons and all the work, that comes along with that, while being honest and allowing ourselves to be where we are. It's just, to me, it's been a kinder pathway to let myself be where I am rather than try to force myself into a place where I'm just, not there yet. And that's okay. So.
Yeah, because I don't think either of us would want somebody to be stuck with the stigma or the misunderstanding that this isn't okay, because we know that the most repeated lesson or in the workbook would be, I'm not a body, I'm free, for I'm still as God created me. And this is repeated so much. And that is fundamental truth in terms of reinforcing our reality as pure abstraction. But like I said earlier, we are in a body, aren't we? At the moment, in terms of how we perceive ourselves. And if there's yeah, please.
Yeah, no, I'll just add to that you're absolutely right, about that being the very, like, the most frequent lesson, I'm not a body, I am free. And so I just want to speak to, like, an example of that teaching coming alive in experience. And I'm sure, many people listening have had experiences that you can name where it's like a moment where you really experientially get the truth of that teaching. I had been caught in an anxiety loop, feeling very, 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 very anxious. This is years back. And I had a moment, it was like the middle of the night. I was up because I couldn't sleep because the anxiety was just, I was feeling so much tension. And I had a moment of willingness that was a more pure willingness than I've ever had before or since. I literally felt all of the defenses, everything just drop. And it was just true, pure willingness. And I saw two lights, like a bigger light and a smaller light, in my mind, like actually saw it with my eyes closed. And as those lights faded, it just came up for a moment and then faded. The anxiety just melted away. And it's experiences like that show me that I'm not a body. And I don't think I would have had that experience if I was being dishonest. I mean, experiences can happen whenever. So I can't say for sure, we can have random experiences that are deeply spiritual, and maybe none of the conditions seem like they were leading up for that to happen. But my path is that honesty and letting myself be where I am, and then having experiences like that experientially teach me that I am not a body. So yeah. And reciting those lessons obviously is part of the curriculum. It's an important part of the curriculum to train our minds.
Absolutely. And what's making me think of there is some of the themes. So just to give you like a quick bit of background, the podcast started without a plan. It started without a blueprint, and its kind of themes have revealed themselves to me in motion. So a lot of the stuff has been me wanting people who have been guesting on here to offer experiential toolkit kind of devices, if you like, and also talking about authenticity and truth having a frequency, like the clairsentient kind of aspects that we all possess of reading energy and what we communicate with energy, and also like this altruism, this, like, it's almost like a dormant desire to serve, to be truly helpful, and it's waiting, and all the time people are completely egoic and consumed by themselves and their own drive, and me first, and it was, as we know in the course, it's like I choose second place so that I can gain first. All the time that isn't in your awareness. It's not until people clear the trauma, or not 100%, but start to do the work, that in almost in direct correlation, the altruism comes up as the trauma dives away, and so therefore, in relation to what we're talking about in specifics and generalisms, then the specifics of all of our journeys, in your case from anxiety to love, in my case to get back above the clouds, and then everybody's sort of individual curriculum that gets them back to that memory, it's all valid once the Holy Spirit can use those specifics for the one goal of remembering the reality of the oneness that we all share. And then the traumas become, I'm sure I've listened to, you've done a Miracle Voices podcast, haven't you?
Yeah,
I really like
so
that.
much fun.
And I did one, and basically I was sort of saying to Matt and Tam, it's like, I know that I'm a kind of team player sort of person. So if you said to me, if you sat me down and said, Leon, you're going to have to go through like 40 odd years of really, really horrible stuff, you're going to have the Course in Miracles on, and you're going to read it, and you're going to get the theory, and you're going to be planting it in your brain and understanding it in your mind. But there's going to be like a delay before you get the joys of the peace of it all. And you're going to go through all of this stuff. It's going to be absolutely horrible. But when you come through the other side, then you're going to be able to sing and speak from a place of authenticity. So something that I wrote down from the course the other day, which really articulates this, and it was like, if you're going to speak the language of people who've suffered, terrible bit of paraphrasing, but it's basically sort of saying, in order to speak the language of people who've suffered, you've had to have lived it or something like that, and that's the then the framing to all of these experiences. So I would go, okay, I'm going to do those 40 years of like complete terror and anxiety, not all at that degree, but it was still, there's no degrees, you're either at peace or you're not, and so it was still in there somewhere, buried at whatever percentage. But if the context is for me to then do that to serve on behalf of other people, and I know enough about myself to say I would do that, yeah, okay, I'm going to do that. And then I offered as well the symbolism of this situation with Judas, and it's like, sort of said to the guys, which one of the 12 disciples comes to mind first for everyone? Judas, Judas, Judas. We know the story so much more than we do the other disciples. And it's like, what does that symbolize? It's like he was devastated at what he'd done to Jesus, and then Jesus just said to him, brother, do what you came here to do. It's like he and these people who offer us the harshest lessons, or these situations which offer us the harshest lessons, they're the ones that have got the most beautiful gifts within them, because they're the ones that show us the light in ourselves and in the world and in others. And then once we reconnect with that from a place where we really feel it and mean it, then what we give off and emit is like this. There's no way of putting a form of measurement to how much stronger it is it? Because the experience and coming through the other side of it is what put you in that place where you can then help other people and be the lamp that lights their way.
Yep, it's our individualized curriculum. Our individualized curriculum. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Awesome.
Amazing.
Great point.
Well, wow, let me see what's on the list. I'm aware that we've had a good old chat for people to dive into there.
Yeah, we've been here for, I think, over an hour now.
Okay, so I did think as well of one joke I quite like. You might have come to realise that I don't mind a laugh now and then. And you reminded me, looking up at your stuff, of a joke where a guy goes to see the doctor and the doctor says, "I've got good news and bad news. What do you want first?" And the guy goes, "Oh, give us the good news." And he says, "Well, the good news is you're not a hypochondriac."
Oh, those of us with anticipatory medical anxiety are like, oh, that's funny.
So thanks for
That's,
reminding me of that. That's been stuck in my mind for quite a while. And thank
that's
you for
awesome.
your journey from anxiety to love, because yeah, it's gifted me with loads of really, really helpful nuggets and gems and insights, and your
Mm,
specifics have spoken to me in the way of my specifics to then get to the generalism. And now we're sharing that conversation here so that it can cast its light into the minds of our brothers and sisters. So amazing.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
So take care. Yeah.
You too.
Cheers.